Welcome to my channel Click and Design. Let's get started. So today we'll be going to learn about basic editing tools in Revit MEP. For that, let's go to System tab. Okay, and from the System tab, let's select some air terminals. So here is the air terminal, and let's select some air terminals. I will just randomly place them in the view. Okay, so I have placed some air terminals in the view, and the first command we will see is selecting. Actually, from the mouse scroll button you can zoom in and zoom out, as you can see on the screen. With the help of mouse wheel you can zoom in and zoom out, okay, as per your requirement. Okay, and if you will press your mouse wheel and then drag, you can do pan on the screen. As you can see on the screen, I can do pan easily. Okay, so we have two different selections in Revit. If you will click your mouse and will drag to the left, you will see this selection over here. This selection is dotted lines. Again, if you click your mouse on the screen and will drag to the right, this selection is solid. Let's see what is the difference between these two selections. Okay, so we have here 6 air terminals. Let's create a window. Let's click this mouse and then drag to draw a selection window. As you can see, as this window is touching the component or the element, or you can say the system family, the system family is being selected. Okay, as you can see that I am just touching the component and it is being selected. So here we have selected 3 components. When we draw the window from the right to the left, just touching the components make them selected. Okay, now let's see the window from left to the right. Okay, so we'll press the mouse on the screen and will draw this window. You can see if I'm trying to touch the element with the window, it is not selecting it. But if I will cover the element in the window, it is selected. You can see if I'll select all the elements within this window, they will be selected. If any of the element will not be selected completely, it will not be selected, like these two. You can see. So this is the difference. Let's see again. I draw this window. If I'll touch any element, it will select. But if I'll draw this window from the left to the right, it need to cover all the element to select it. So this is how selection works in Revit MEP. So next we have filters. Let's see how filters work. Right now we have air terminals in our working area. Let's draw some ducts. Okay, so this is one of the duct. So now let's insert some mechanical equipments in the drawing area. Let's say this family VAV. I will place them here. Enough. Now see, I will select this all the items from this window. They are being selected. Okay, you can see all the items are selected. Now on the top in the modify tab you can see filter. If you will select this filter, you can see all the list of items which I have selected. I have selected air terminals, ducts and mechanical equipments. Let us suppose I want to select only the ducts and want to exclude the air terminals and the mechanical equipments. So I will just uncheck them, air terminals and mechanical equipments, and then OK. It will select only the duct. This is how filter works. And if you just want to remove this duct, you can just delete from the keyboard. Let us suppose I want to remove all the air terminals from this working area. Okay, and again I will select all the elements. We'll go to filter. We'll uncheck mechanical equipment. I want to select only the air terminals. and OK. Then just press delete from the keyboard and they will be gone. Okay, so this is how filter works in Revit. Now we'll see the use of tab key in Revit. For that, let's create a HVAC system. For that, we'll go to System tab and we'll select a mechanical equipment. Okay, and here we can define the elevation. Let's say the elevation of this equipment is 3400 millimeters. So just click on the screen and this equipment will be placed. So now let's select it back and you can see our element is placed on level 1 and elevation of the element is 3400 millimeters. Okay, now let's create some ducts from this equipment. If you will select this equipment, you can see some of the ports, this output port and this input port. If you will just select or you will just check on this sign, if you will just go to the sign, this cross sign, okay, and here will be written create duct, just click over this and you will be able to create a duct as shown in the video. Where you will press, the duct will take its place. Okay, now let's go again to mechanical equipment and select it. It is showing one more port, so let's click on this sign to create a duct. So this is how you can create a duct anywhere where you want. When you will click, duct will take its place. So we have created a small system. Now let's refine the visual settings. From here I will select fine and from visual style I will select shaded. So you can see how it works. Now let's add some air terminals to this system. I will go to System tab and here I see I have some air terminals. We'll select this air terminals and here you can apply the elevation. Let's say elevation of the air terminal from the level 1 be 2700 mm. Okay, so where you will click on the screen, there the air terminals will take place. So let's place it anywhere. So I have placed the air terminals. Now let's select this air terminal. Okay, I want to connect this air terminal to this duct. Let's select it and then we'll go to Modify tab. On the above you can see the Modify tab. Here you can see Connect into. This option let you connect this air terminal to the duct. We'll select this Connect into and then we'll select this duct. So you can see automatically this air terminal is connected to the duct. Okay, so in the same way, let's connect this terminal. We'll select this terminal and then connect into duct. Again select, connect into duct. Okay, so now let's see how you can make the selection with the help of a tab key. Now you can see we have created a small circuit of HVAC duct system. Okay, so let's bring your mouse over this duct over here, small duct. When you will bring your mouse over this duct will change its color, will become blue. It means your duct has been selected. Okay, if you want to select all the circuit from the duct to the mechanical equipment, then duct and to this terminals, for that let's go back to this duct till this blue color will appear and then press tab key 1 2. Okay, so see all the circuit has been changed to blue color, means you have selected all the circuit. Now you have to just click. When you will click from your mouse, you can select all the circuit. So this is how you can select the circuit with the help of tab key. Now the next command we have is move. For that let's select this circuit. Let's suppose if I want to move this circuit from this position to different. Okay, so I've selected this circuit, then I'll go to Modify tab. In the Modify tab I can see move command over here. Select this move command. Now I need to specify a base point or the pickup point. Let's say this end point will be my pickup point. Now I can drag and drop it anywhere. Okay, now you can see it is moving only in the X direction, or you can say in the Y direction, but not in different directions. Let us say if I want to place this circuit at the angle of 45, at an angle of 45, it is not going. For that I need to uncheck this constraint over here. Say it is checked, I will just uncheck it, and now it can go in any direction. Okay, so see, in 45 degrees you can place it anywhere. To place it on the screen just click your mouse and your object will be moved. Now let's see the copy command. For example, I want to make a lot of copies from this circuit, so I will select the circuit. Okay, now here I have the copy command. We'll select copy. Now you can see constraint. If you want constraint, if you want to move your copies in X and Y direction, so you can check constraint. And next we have the multiple. If you want to create multiple copies, for that you can select multiple. So let's select multiple and let's select constraint. Okay, now we need to select the base point. It means the pickup point, from which point you want to pick up this circuit. So let's select this edge of the duct as the pickup point. I will click over here, and now I can create copies where I want. So you can see I can create multiple copies. So now we'll see the rotate command. For that, let's select this circuit. Okay, let us suppose I want to rotate this circuit to an angle of 180 degrees. For that, I'll go to this rotate over here. I'll select rotate. When I will select this rotate, you can see this stick. So you can apply this stick anywhere for the reference purpose. I place this stick about the x-axis, okay, for the reference, or you can say it is the baseline from which you will define the angle. Okay, so I will click over here, and then you can specify the angle about which angle you want to rotate the circuit. Let us say I will select 180 degrees. So just enter 180 degree from your keyboard and then press enter key, and your circuit will be rotated about an angle of 180. Let's make it Ctrl Z. Okay, just pressing Ctrl plus Z, you can undo this. Now let's again select this circuit. We'll go again to rotate. Okay, now we have copy and angle. You can use copy if you want to create a copy also. So let's select this copy. Okay, and let's specify the base point. Okay, so I'm selecting this X direction as base point. So let's click here. So this will be the base reference point. Okay, now specify the angle. Let's say angle will be 90 degrees, 90, and then enter. So you can see you will have the copy and the original. The copy will be rotated about an angle of 90 degrees or the angle which you specified. So this is how rotation works. Now next command we have is mirror. Let us suppose I have these two circuits over here and I want to mirror copy them on the right side over here. So for that I will select these two circuits. Okay, then we'll go to modify tab. Here I have mirror draw axis. We'll select this draw axis, and then we'll draw an axis about which you want to do mirror, just, and you will get the mirror copy on the right side. Okay, this is mirror draw axis where you have to draw an axis. The modify tab we have mirror pick axis. This is the next command for the mirror. For this you should already have an axis. So right now we don't have any axis. Okay, so we'll create an axis. For that let's draw a wall. I will go to architecture, a wall. I will select a wall architecture. and we'll create a wall over here. Okay, so let us say I want to mirror all these circuits about this wall on the right side. Okay, so I will select all the circuits and then we'll go to mirror pick axis. So I will pick this wall as an axis, and you can see these are the mirror copies produced about the wall. Okay, this is how mirror works. Now next we have a linear array. Okay, if you want to create a linear array like we have in the AutoCAD arrays, same we have in the Revit arrays. For that, let's select this system. I want to create an array of this system, and then in the modify we have array over here. Okay, so let's select it. So now you can see linear array we have selected. Next we have the group and associate. Next we have group and associate. It will create a relation between all the elements. And next we have the number. Here you will specify the number of copies you want to make. Let's say I want 8 number of copies. So next we have move to, and in move to we can see second and last. If we will select second, okay, here we will specify the distance between the first and the second element. Or if we will select last, here we need to specify the distance between the first element and the last element. So let's see about the second. I will specify the distance between the first and the second. Okay, and next we need to specify the pickup point or the base point. Let's say this midpoint is the pickup point. Okay, I will click here, will select, and now I can drag my copy and specify the distance between the first and the second. So now you can see the distance between the first and second is 19,000. Let's say I want the distance between the first and second to be 10,000. So I will write 10,000. Okay, and then we'll click enter. So now you can see I have 8 copies together with distance between them is 10,000. Now again let's select this circuit. We'll go to array and then again linear, group and associate, number. Let's say number I want to be 4. Then move to last. Here I will select last. Okay, now select the pickup point. Let's say the midpoint, and then we'll specify the distance between first and last. Okay, here let's say the distance between the first and last be about 40,000 millimeters, and then we'll click enter. So you can see I have created an array where the distance between the first element and the last element is 40,000 and the number of elements is 4. So this is how array works. Next we have the radial array command. For that, let's go to system tab and let's select some A terminals. So I have this A terminal over here and here. So let's say this A terminal is the center of rotation for the radial array, and from this A terminal we will create radial array. So let's select this terminal and go to array. Then we'll select the radial array. Next we have the group and associate. Next we need to apply the number of copies you want to create. Next we have move to second or the last. So here let's specify the second and the angle. So here we need to specify the angle between the first and the second element. Okay, we will do later on. Next let's go to center of rotation. Here you need to specify the center of rotation for the array. So for that, let's click on place and let's specify the center of rotation. The center of rotation will be the center of this A terminal, and let's click over it, and you can see a line is emerging. So let's say now I will place the angle be 45 degrees between the first and the second element. Okay, we'll click enter, and then it is asking for the number. As I have specified 3 over here on the top, you can see the number is 3. If I want to increase the number, let's say I want the numbers to be 6, I will press 6 and then we'll press enter. So I will have 6 copies, okay, in a radial array. So this is how radial array works. Let's do one more time. Let's do Ctrl Z. Let's select this A terminal again. Let's go to array. Then this time let's say the number of copies will be 8, and here now move to last. I will select, and then center of rotation, place. So I have this center of rotation over here, and for the reference let's put this line about the y-axis, and now we need to specify the angle between the first and the last object. So let the angle be 180 degrees, and then press enter. So you can see I have placed 8 elements where the angle between the first and the last element is 180 degrees. So this is how radial array works. Now the second command we have is the extend. For that, let's go to architecture. We'll create a wall. So here you can see a wall. Okay. So here we have this wall over here, and now let's draw a pipe. We'll go to system tab, and here we have pipe. We'll draw a pipe. Now let's talk about the extend. Let us suppose I want to extend this pipe to this wall. For that I will go to modify, and here I have this trim extend single element. So this is the same command for trimming and extending. So we'll select this. We'll select the boundary first. So the wall is the boundary. We'll select the wall, and then we'll select the pipe. So this pipe will be extended till this boundary. It was extend. Now let us suppose our pipe is crossing the wall. As you can see, I want to trim this pipe about the wall. For that I will again go to this command, trim extend single element. We'll select the wall first, and then the pipe. So you will see this wall will trim this pipe. So this is how trim and extend works. Now the next command we have is trim extend to corner. For that let's go to systems, pipes. I will draw 2 pipes over here, first one and the second one. Let us say I want to make a corner from these 2 pipes. Okay, so I will go to modify. Here I have trim extend to corner. We'll select both the pipes, and they will create a corner with the help of an elbow joint. Okay, so next command we have trim and extends multiple elements. That let's go to system. We'll draw some pipes over here. So here I have 3 pipes. Now let's go to architecture, and we'll sketch a wall. Here I have this architectural wall. Okay, so let us suppose I want to extend all these pipes in a single time to this wall. So for that we'll go to modify, and here we have this trim extend multiple elements. For that, first of all I will select the wall, the boundary, and then can select every pipe. So it is for multiple elements. So this is how you can extend all the pipes to a boundary. Next we have align command. For that let's go to architecture. We'll draw a wall. So here we have the wall. Okay, a corner basically. And about this corner I will draw some pipes. For that I will go to systems, pipes. So I draw this pipe, and let I draw one more pipe over here. So you can see these pipes are not horizontal or vertical. They are inclined to an angle. Let's talk about this pipe. This pipe is inclined to an angle and it is not horizontal. For example, I want to make this pipe horizontal to this wall. For that I will use align command. Let's go to modify. Here we have the align command. So we'll select this align command. We'll choose the wall first, and then the pipe. So you can see the pipe is aligned to the wall. Here you can see a constraint. This is a lock basically. If you will press over this lock, so this element will be locked in a particular position. It will not move. Next, this wall, vertical wall, and this pipe. Let's make them align. Let's select this line and this pipe. So you can see how easily you can align here. Now with the help of trim and extend, let's connect these pipes. For that, I have this trim and extend to corner. We'll select this and we'll select both the pipes to make a corner. So this is how things work in Revit. So our next command is offset. For that I have created a pipe. Let's select this pipe, and then in the modify you can see here we have the offset. To make an offset, you can do it two ways, graphical or numerical. Let's start with numerical, and let's say the offset distance between be 1000. Offset is basically creating copies or moving the elements about a distance. So we have specified the distance, and next we have the copy. If you want to create a copy, select copy. Now take your mouse to the element. So you will see here the right and the left, these lines specify the placement of the element. If you want to place the element on the right, so take your mouse to little right, and when you will see this line on the right, just click it. You will have the offset. Okay, in the same way, if you want to place element on the left, wait till this line will appear on the left, and when this line will appear, just click it. So this is how offset works. Okay, this was numerical method. For the graphical offset, I will choose graphical. Then I will specify the element which I want to offset. So this is the pipe, and now I will select the base point. Any point can be the base point. Let's say this middle point. Okay, now I can copy it anywhere. You can see we have this dimension now between the two elements. Right now dimension is 1000. If you want the dimension to be 500, write 500 and enter. You will have an offset at a distance of 500. So this is how offset works. Next we will see how to create groups in Revit. Let's go to systems. We'll create some air terminals. So let's see, 1, 2, 3 and this 4 air terminals we have created. And now if you want to create a group out of these terminals, for that I will go to modify, and here I can see here this create group. We'll select this, and then you can specify the name of the group. Let the group be air terminals. Okay, then click OK. Now you have to select all the entities or the elements for the group. For that, click on add to select elements 1, 2, 3, 4. Now I have selected all the elements for the group, and then click on finish. So you have created a group. If you will see, if you will bring your mouse to the elements, you can see this blue rectangular. It means all these elements are in a group. Let's again select this group, click. In case if you want to remove any one of the element from this group, just go to edit group over here, and then select remove. Now you can unselect the element which you want to remove. Let us say I want to remove this air terminal. We'll select it and then finish. Okay, now again bring the mouse over the group and click. You can see all these 3 elements are in a group, and this one is not in a group already. Okay, and let us say I want to ungroup all these elements. So again I will bring the mouse to this group, and then I have this option ungroup. We'll select this option ungroup, and all the elements will come out from the group and will act as individual. Okay, let's select them again, and then again create a group 1, let's say, and okay. If you want to create similar groups, you can go to modify, and over here you can see create similar. Let's select it, and you can create similar groups, as you can see. So this is how it works. Next we have the slice command. For that, let's draw a duct. We'll go to systems. Here we have the ducts. We'll draw a duct. You can see we have a duct over here. In the modify tab, we have this command, split elements. We'll select the split elements, and you can split the elements into two parts. Like I can click it anywhere, and you can see it has split the elements in two parts. Okay, so now press on modify. You can see already we have two ducts. Okay, so the next command we have is split with gap. For that, let's go to architecture. We'll draw a wall. You can see a wall over here. This is the top view, and if you want to split this wall into two parts, or you want to make a separation, if you want to split this wall with a gap in between, for that let's go to modify, and here we have split with gap. Now you can split the wall using this command with a gap. So you can see this is the gap. Okay, if you want you can delete it also. And let's see this wall in 3D view. Here we have the 3D view. Click over this and you will get the 3D view of these walls. So here you can see the walls. So now next we have pin and unpin command. For that, let's create a duct. Okay, if I will select this duct and will drag it, it can be dragged easily. As you can see, I can drag it anywhere. Okay, but if I want that this duct does not move, okay, for that I have in modify this pin command. If I will select this pin, it will lock this command to a place. So now let's move this. You can see I cannot move it anywhere because it is pinned over here. To make it unpin, again select this duct, go to modify, and here we have this unpin. If you will do unpin, this pin will be removed and you can easily move your duct wherever you want. Okay, next we have the delete command. If you want to delete any model, just select the model, then go to modify tab, and here we have this cross. Select this cross and this element will be gone. So this is how modifying takes place in Revit MEP.